In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
I don't speak. I float in the air wrapped in a sheet. I'm not a real person. I'm a ghost trapped in a beat. I translate when my voice is read through a seismograph and the noises spread, picked up and transmitted through Royce's head. Trapped him in his room, possessed him and hoist his bed till the evilness flows through his blood like poisonous lead. I told him each one of his boys is dead. And I asked him to come to the dark side and he made a choice and said, "Yo, who hard, yo? I done worse." We can get in the two cars and accelerate at each other and see which one will swerve first. Two blind bandits panic whose mental capacity holds that of a globe on top of 9 other planets. He kissed the cheek of the devil, intelligence level is hellier than treble peeking on speakers in the ghetto. Dismissal, I'm not a fair man. Disgrace, the race of an atheist. Intercepting missiles with my bare hands like a patriot. One track sliced without swords, I buried the Christ corpse in my past life when a black knight mounted the white horse. And stay overworked. It's like the Nazis and the nation collaborating, attempting to take over the earth. This is what happens when bad meets evil. We in the trees looking like Vietnamese people. Oh my God. All right. Can I get lamest ways to open my podcast, please, for 500, Alex? Welcome aboard. This is the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers. Coming back to talk to you about the Nazis and the nation collaborating. I have the mother's milk here in my vessel of the art. Let's get that party started. So I got a couple correspondences. I got a couple telegrams. Got a couple communiques regarding last episode of the Abracast. The Behold or Bring Forth the Red Heifer. So I thought that I would take the opportunity to answer some of the correspondences and also unpack this Red Heifer business a little bit more. If you have your finger on the pulse of, I don't know what I would call this, the end of the world chatter, then Red Heifer stuff is starting to pop up everywhere. So it only took them a week to fucking catch up, but here we go. I kind of, instead of reading letters and answering them directly, I'm just going to kind of do the show like I normally would do, and hopefully the folks that reached out to me will hear this and whatever. As far as, okay, so what we're going to talk about, what we're going to start off with is this article, or this paper written called Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Nazis and the Holocaust, the Origins, Natures, and After Effects of Collaboration. It's like somebody read this before they... So I'm not going to read the whole bit. Here's the abstract of it. The abstract here on the Abracast. In the fall of 2015, when the Palestinian Authority claimed that the state of Israel posed threats to the Al-Asqa Mosque in Jerusalem, public attention in Israel turned again to Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the former Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, a collaborator with Nazi Germany and the leader of Palestinian nationalism before and immediately after World War II. Some historians, and briefly Israel's prime minister, who attributed to Husseini a significant decision-making role in the Holocaust in Europe. The following essay draws on scholarship on Holocaust decision-making in order to demonstrate that Husseini did not have an impact on Hitler's decisions to murder the Jews in Europe. His historical importance may be found in the text and the speeches and essays of 1930s and 1940s. They offer abundant evidence his impact on Nazi Germany's Arabic language propaganda aimed at North Africa and Middle East during World War II and the Holocaust before, during, and after his presence from Berlin in 1941 and 1945. Husseini played a central role in shaping the political traditions of Islamism by offering an interpretation of the religion of Islam as intrinsically anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist, and in connecting that version of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories of modern European history. So if you go back in the show, these might even be on the red vault by now. I don't know for sure. And like I mentioned, the website is down. I don't have a feature. It's back up in some ways. It's limping around, but I don't have a featured topic link. If I did, you can easily find all these Islam episodes where we bust into this and talk about all this stuff. And I mentioned in the past, I mentioned this Eminem lyric that I thought was hilarious. That came out, I don't know, back in like 2000 or who knows when it fucking came out. But so I did want to talk a little bit about the Grand Mufti. So you know, this guy had Arab Panzer divisions out there. Like, I mean, I don't, you know, the Quran says, hey, the rock will call out, Muslim, there's a Jew behind me, come and kill him. I don't know why this whole thing about anti-Semitism. So one of the ways that I think about, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to figure out the best way for me to kind of explain how I think about this. And what I think is, like, the Middle East is like a shitty neighborhood. This is going bad already. And Israel's got like the best house on the block. Like, it's like a mansion compared to the other fucking houses on the block. Say they're in an HOA or something. And every other family or whatever that lives on that block in a house that's not so good hates the people that live in the nice house. I mean, they hate their guts. They like have secret meetings where they just get together and talk about how shitty the people in the big house lives. And for some reason or another, there are people that start squatting in the backyard of the good house. So all the other people in the neighborhood start like, hey, talking to the people that are squatting in the backyard of like the mansion. And they're like, hey, we're going to give you some knives and some hang gliders and shit. And we want you really just to fuck the people up in this house. That's the way I think of it. I don't think of it as Israel as a bully. Well, because first of all, it's global politics. It's not middle school. So if you're going to try to sell me on Israel being a bully, I mean, I feel like we're operating on two different fucking like wavelengths here. So in the 6-Day War would be like everybody in the neighborhood like storms the good the nice mansion. They storm and they try to fuck everything up, and the people that live in the house like had to whip their ass. So if you want to talk about bullying or whatever, you talk about like, well, I don't know, gang stalk or something, like they're banded together to rush this house. So that's kind of how I think, and it might be juvenile. I don't know. Whatever. The Al-Asqa is in danger, liable. History of a lie. The father of the lie, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the birth father of the, quote, Al-Asqa is in danger, unquote, liable, for the first in a new era to claim that the Jews were scheming to destroy the Al-Asqa Mosque and build a third temple in its place, was the Grand Mufti al-Husseini, who lived 3/4 of a century until 1974, good riddance, and had a particular impact on Palestine for the first half of the 20th century. His life and teachings, however, are still relevant today regarding the Temple Mount mosques, and the Al-Asqa is in danger, liable. His successors include the chairman of the Fatah and a Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat, the current head of the northern branch of Israeli Islamic movement, Rahid Salah, have carried his torch. This is one of these guys that wears a funny hat, bro. In these episodes, I always like to call out the funny hats. Husseini was born in Jerusalem at the end of the 19th century. He was the son of a mufti in Jerusalem at the time, Tahir al-Husseini, known as one of his fervent opponents of Zionism. The Jerusalemite Husseini family claims to be descended from Hussein, son of Caliph Ali, and the wife, Fatima, daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. Amin al-Husseini was educated in Jerusalem at the age of 17, and he went to study in the Islamic University of Al-Azhar in Cairo, where he spent 2 years. He then traveled to Mecca for the first time, and he won the title of Hajj. When World War I broke out, he was enlisted into the Ottoman army. 2 years later, he came down with dysentery and returned to Jerusalem. He was appointed to the first public post in 1918 in the office of British military governor of Jerusalem. A year later, Husseini was awarded a junior position in the British military administration in Damascus. There he began making contact with nationalist circles. Okay, I'm going to skip down here a little bit. The first significant event in which Husseini played a role, in particularly violent one, in 1920 at the end of Nabi Musa holiday, as thousands of Muslims returned in a procession from Nabi Musa to Jerusalem. Husseini fired up the crowd. The procession deteriorated into severe violence, and the way 5 Jews were murdered and 211 were injured. Leading the procession itself was Husseini's stepbrother, Mufti Kamil al-Husseini, who, in contrast to Amin, tried, unsuccessfully, however, to subdue the passions. The British ensured the arrest warrant for Amin al-Husseini, who fled across the Jordan from there to Damascus, and his absence was given a military sentence of 10 years imprisonment. 5 months later, Sir Herbert Samuel assumed the post of High Commissioner. The exiled Hajj Amin was granted a pardon. All right, I'm going to skip down here a little bit farther, trying to get to the meat and potatoes. Now that he held both the senior religious positions, Husseini launched an enterprise of renovating the Dome of the Rock in the Al-Asqa Mosque on the Temple Mount. This further boosted his power and popularity among the Muslims, both locally and globally. The two mosques had indeed fell into neglect and disrepair, with renovations urgently needed. But this task, which Husseini made sure would attract plenty of publicity, was for him a lever to further goals: exalted personal status in the Muslim world, harnessing the Muslim countries to the national struggle of the Palestinians, and drawing the gaze of millions of Muslims the world over to the holy places of Islam in Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. By the end of 1924, about 90,000 pounds sterling had been collected, and to further impress the target audience and recruit still more funds, Husseini's emissaries carried proofs of the dangers the Jews posed to the Temple Mount. These were apparently leaflets for soliciting contributions to Jewish Torah institutions in Jerusalem, for example, the Torah Life Yeshiva, and propaganda materials from various Zionist groups, which included drawings of the Al-Asqa Mosque, or the Dome of the Rock, adorned with Jewish symbols, primarily the Stars of David. These propaganda materials helped directors of the Jewish institutions in Palestine to mobilize funds from Jewish donors abroad, and in vain did Yeshuv leaders explain that these materials were solely for fundraising, as already the practice of for many decades. Another issue was the traditional Jewish adornment known as the Mitzrach, which included a picture of the Temple Mount and its mosques, and it had been hung in numerous Jewish homes in Palestine and abroad for hundreds of years to mark Jerusalem as the direction of prayer. Husseini and his comrades, however, used the Mizrach to incite against the Jews and the Zionist movement. They kept claiming that the Jews were plotting to destroy the mosque and to build the temple in their stead. Husseini himself asserted that Zionism is both religious and political Jewish idea, and among its goals was the rebuilding of the temple that is called Solomon's Temple in place of the blessed Al-Asqa Mosque, and the conducting of religious worship in it. So, when the flood happened, a lot of people were like, geez, how did the Mossad, how did the Israeli intelligence apparatus miss this? And this actually is like leading to like a darker sort of path, or a darker sort of concept, right? Like, what if they knew this was going to happen and let it, like a Pearl Harbor kind of situation? And this would give them the opportunity to clear out and use those red heifers we were talking about. That's just one kind of thing that I thought of when I'm looking at this stuff. Husseini went in two directions at once. While one hand he renovated the mosques and enhanced their status along with his own, with the other hand he constantly dealt in incitement and outright lies with the Jews. Husseini exploited the Jews' struggle for their right to pray at the Western Wall and for better conditions in its narrow prayer plaza to whip up anger against them and accuse them of much more ambitious aims, the destruction of the mosques and the building of the third temple in their stead. Husseini exploited the Jews' struggle for the right to pray. Okay, this just repeats here. So this is from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Strategic Alliances for Secure, Connected, and Prosperous Regions. I will paste a link to the whole article in the show notes. It goes on and on and on. I'm going to move on, though. I think that we sort of established here that this has been a talking point for quite a while, and that this is what the guy that we talked about in the last episode, when he's babbling on about the 100 days, the flood, he mentions, these red heifers. So these red heifers are a real fucking thing. Now we just got to figure out what, like, the idea or the plan was. So here during the last administration, we had the Abraham Accords. And the Abraham Accords were this sort of monumental peace agreement between Israel and their sort of neighbors, right? So here on the WashingtonInstitute.org, Palestinians more positive on the Abraham Accords than open to vying powers than their Arab neighbors. Well, I wonder what changed. Commissioned by the Washington Institute and concluded in July 2023 by the Palestinian Center for Public Opinion, this poll assessed Palestinian perceptions on topics ranging from the war in Ukraine to internal politics, divisions of the viability of the Israeli-Palestine negotiations, paired with polling earlier in April of 2023 and from 7 Arab countries. Comparing the response has exposed subtle yet meaningful contrast between the Palestinian viewpoint and the Arab countries, as well as differences among Palestinians themselves living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Almost half of the Palestinians view the Abraham Accords positively, although a majority feels neglected by the Arab governments by making peace. It's because they were excluded from the peace process. The Orange administration was like, fuck them. They don't want to come to the table. Fuck them. We'll do it without them. I'm paraphrasing. He might not have said those exact words. When compared to the average 16% of other Arab publics in April 2023, a poll who viewed the Abraham Accords as somewhat or very positive for the region, attitudes in Gaza and East Jerusalem were starkly different. Notably, 47% in Gaza and 63% in East Jerusalem express a positive view of the regional impacts of the Accords, while the percentage of those who held this opinion shrinks in the West Bank and similar portions in the European Union, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, which had the most positive response April 2023 at 27%. That said, the solid majority of the 3 locations, 58 in Gaza, 61 in the West Bank, and 64 in East Jerusalem, agree with the following statement: Arab governments are neglecting the Palestinians and starting to make friends with Israel because they think the Palestinians should be more willing to compromise. And, as discussed, the separate article, a significant number of Gazans and some West Bankers agree that Palestinian leadership should normalize with Israel were Saudi Arabia to do, if Saudi Arabia were to do so. Another issue on which Palestinians diverge from other Arab publics was the prospect of receiving aid from Israel in the wake of the natural disaster, whereas at least 2/3 of other Arab publics agreed with that statement. Agreed with the statement. In the case of an earthquake or other natural disasters, as we just saw in Syria and Turkey, Arab countries should refuse humanitarian aid from Israel. This percentage dips to 50% in Gaza, 58% in the West Bank, and 59% in Jerusalem. Still, Palestinian opinions largely aligned with those of Arab countries on other topics related to Israel regarding the regional impact of Hamas firing missiles from Gaza into Israel, another round of which occurred between the periods that the Arab, regional, and Palestinian polls were fielded. Respondents in the West Bank and East Jerusalem remained in the middle of the pack, with 41% saying the development would have somewhat positive effect. Gaza residents had the most positive response, 58% to the missiles of all Palestinians polled, trailing behind only Lebanon 62 and Jordan 60. So something that you'll hear about is, well, you know, Egypt and the other houses on the block The other houses on the block won't take these squatters. They just won't do it. They won't open up their... They won't unroll the welcome mat for Palestinians. None of them will. And there's a big article from APnews.com why Egypt and other Arab countries are unwilling to take in Palestinian refugees from Gaza. And I'm running a little bit behind already. God damn it. I'm running a little bit behind already, but the gist of it is they're a liability, right? Because wherever they go, they fucking shoot rockets in Israel. So the idea is if we let these fuckers in, they're going to wind up shooting rockets from wherever else, and they're going to wind up being on the hook. They're going to have to take some kind of responsibility for these guys. I'll include this link. I'll include this link so you can check it out if you're interested in it. For sure. But we got to move. I got to keep moving. We got some Red Heifer stuff to talk about. We're going to do that right after this. The Red Heifer, the Third Temple, and the End of Days. This is from OnePageBibleSummary.com. It's just a little taste of what we're going to get into. Enough already with this music. A red heifer, basically a red cow. It is a cow whose coat has no more than one single hair of any other color, and other than red, and whose skin, hooves, and eyelids are also reddish. The red heifer is described in Numbers 19, which we talked about last week. I'm not going to go over it again. Burning the ashes of a red heifer is mandatory and lasting. Verse 19:10. Act for the beginning of the temple offering to God. The ashes of the red heifer is a key element in a biblically mandated purification ritual. These ashes are required for purification in a range of situations, mainly talking about contact with dead bodies. Like I said, we did just talk about this last week. Now, with all the bloodshed in the Temple Mount down through the centuries, the mound itself must be cleansed before the temple can be built. Without the red heifer even trying to build a third temple, the second one was destroyed in 70 AD, which would prohibit the act of properly sacrificing or offering sacrifices to God. And before Jesus will be back for the second time, the temple needs to be present. Without a red heifer, the temple sacrifices will not be suitable for worship. One can see the absolute significance of the appearance of this red heifer so that the prophecies concerning the second return of Christ can be fulfilled. Moses prepared the first red heifer. From that time until the destruction of the temple, only 9 heifers were prepared. As the amount of ashes needed is very small, there's been no proper red heifer in Israel for the past 2,000 years. The difficulty in finding red heifers anywhere is that they are not only rare, but the animal also has to meet requirements stipulated in the Torah and the oral Talmud. the Mishur and the Gemara oral Jewish laws and commentaries. The 5 main criteria, as we know, it should be completely red with no spot or blemish. It has to be a female. Heifers are only female. And it hasn't been used for labor. A yoke had never been put upon it. She's never been pregnant, and it is 3 to 4 years old. Some heifers have been located in the past, from 1996, but were shortly disqualified because of blemishes that later appeared on the body. Word has come from Israel that a spotless red heifer has been born, and it is the long-awaited red heifer. Huge prophetic implications are in place. The arrival of the next red heifer could be the signal that the third temple can now be built. The end times and the judgment day will follow. Very recently, the Temple Institution of Jerusalem, which runs a Raise the Red Heifer program, announced that on the 17th day of Elul 5778, which is August 28th, 2018, a red heifer was born in the land of Israel. The red heifer candidate is being raised and is specifically cared for under the auspices of the Temple Institute's Raise a Red Heifer program. It remains without blemishes and could be used in the reestablishment of the temple service. So the 4 red heifers in this specific situation come from Texas. So this is not the same red heifer. In 2015, the Institute launched the Raise a Red Heifer project to use the power of modern technology to breed cows to meet the requirements. Due to laws restricting the importation of live cattle into Israel, the Temple Institute imported frozen embryos of red Angus, implanting them in Israeli domestic cows. The pregnant cows were raised on cattle ranches in different locations through the country. For this red heifer, since 1 week after its birth, was certified by a board of rabbis as fulfilling all the biblical requirements. The rabbis emphasized that the heifer could at any time acquire blemishes, rendering it unsuitable. They will be inspecting the calf periodically to verify its condition. One other thing we ought to note, unlike most other aspects of the temple service, burning the red heifer and the use of its ashes to purify do not require ascending to the temple mount. I said this last week. The ease off the political complications that may rise, since Jews are currently not allowed by law to pray or to perform any rituals at the holy site. Okay, they got us up to speed a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about these political ramifications. Hamas is calling its attack Al-Asqa flood. Why is the Jerusalem mosque so important in Gaza? What does the mosque far from Gaza have to do with the violence in Israel? This is from forward.com. After Hamas militants invaded southern Israel and launched a barrage of rockets at the Israeli cities in a surprise attack Saturday morning, the Hamas leader named the operation Al-Asqa Flood, saying the attack was in defense of the Al-Asqa Mosque. The Hamas statements also mentioned Israel's blockade of Gaza and Israel's violence against the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank as motivations for the attack, as well as stating Hamas's general opposition to the Jewish state's existence. And online, some are hailing the attack as the beginning of Israel's destruction, but the mosque looms large in the justification and imagery Hamas has used to justify its offensive. Israel, one Hamas statement said, allowed Jewish groups to desecrate Al-Asqa Mosque. It also referred to Jewish intentions of erecting their alleged temple on the ruins of the shrine of our prophet Muhammad. The Al-Asqa complex which is home to Dome of the Rock, may be far from Gaza in terms of geography, but it is an important Muslim holy site and has been a flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Ariel Sharon's visit to the site in 2000 helped spark the Second Intifada. Hamas, which governs Gaza, fired rockets into Israel in 2021. They're always firing rockets, these fucking rocket bitches, in response to the Israel occupation of the Al-Asqa complex, setting off a longer and more brutal conflict. Clashes at the site last year also resulted in rocket fire from Gaza. So why is Al-Asqa so inflammatory? Al-Asqa is one of the holiest sites in Islam according to Muslim belief. Muhammad ascended to heaven from the mosque, which is situated at the top of the hill in the center of Jerusalem's old city. But the mosque complex also stands on the holiest site in Judaism, the Temple Mount, site of the first and second temples, which contained the Holy of Holies, the dwelling place of God. Given the symbolic weight of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, both Israelis and Palestinians cite their history at the holy site as proof of their claim to Jerusalem. Al-Asqa has been seen by many Palestinians as a symbol of the national ambitions, the desire for a Palestinian capital in Jerusalem. It is one of the holy areas in Jerusalem that Israel does not officially consider under its administration, having handed it over to the Jordanian trust known as the Waqf. I don't know. After taking control of the old city during the 1967 war. Conversely, some of the Israelis, including Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security, see control of the site as an important expression of Israel's sovereignty over all of Jerusalem. Israel annexed the largely Palestinian East Jerusalem in 1980 in a move that is not internationally recognized. The U.S. recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital during the Orange administration. Something to think about. Control of the complex around Al-Asqa has been hotly contested. The presence of Israel's security forces as well as a Jewish prayer at the site is seen by Palestinians as an aggressive disruption to the status quo. Prayer at Al-Asqa as a flashpoint. Even on the best of days, the atmosphere at the holy site is tense. While Muslims regularly pray at the mosque, Israeli forces sometimes limit Palestinian access, probably because they keep shooting rockets everywhere. And although Christians and Jews can visit the site, they are not allowed to pray there, per Israel's agreement with the Waqf. Historically, Israel's police has been reprimanded to remove any non-Muslim attempting to pray due to the fact that even the tiniest shifts in the norms are often interpreted by the other side as an act of aggression. Yet recently, Israel's forces have quietly allowed Jewish groups to pray on the site, guarding them as they do so. Ultra-nationalist Jewish groups, some of whom advocate for the taking over the area in order to build Jerusalem's prophesied third temple, have made a point by praying as they are encouraged other Jews to join them as a form of asserting control over the site. Judaism's three pilgrimage festivals, Piash, Shavuot, and the harvest holiday Sukkot, each ended Friday, are prime time when Jewish activists attempt to enter the Al-Asqa complex and pray there. In a statement about Saturday's attack, Hamas directly referenced Jewish prayer at the site, calling it an act of aggression. that, quote, had reached its peak, unquote. Hamas specifically mentioned the blowing of the shofars. I do know what a shofar is. It's a horn made out of a ram's head. I wrote a book about it. Actually, I didn't. But it is in a book that I wrote. Kind of. It's called The Ages. It's a comic book, whatever. As well as sprinkling of a red cow's blood, which Jewish texts state is a precursor to the construction of the third temple. So we're getting, yep, okay, it's not the blood of the red cow, as we know already. I mean, we read the fucking text. Like, it's not the blood of the cow. That really made me upset for some reason. As proof of their belief, Israel plans to destroy the mosque and the entire compound, justifying the attack. Thought police. While perhaps ideally shared prayer at the shared holy site would be possible peacefully, practically speaking, Jewish prayers on a site is a disruption of the status quo, often done with the geopolitical ambitions in mind. At the minimum, it's demonstration of Israeli control in the area, not officially in its power, and yet another loss of Palestinian rights and autonomy in the region. At its most extreme, Jewish prayer signals the intention on the part of extremist religious groups to rebuild the Jewish temple at the site. Although Saturday's attack from Hamas is far from Al-Asqa Mosque, symbolic importance means that any and all shifts in behavior at the area have political and national meaning and consequence. Hamas's choice to name their attack Al-Asqa Flood and to tie the protection of the holy site seems calculated to garner support from Palestinians in the West Bank around the West Bank and Muslims around the world. I knew I could do it. All right, so enough fucking around. Let's get to this Red Heifer business. Back to the Messianic Prophecy Bible Project, the Red Heifer, the deepest mystery in the Torah. So, after disqualifying several hopeful candidates to fulfill the ordinance of the Red Heifer, the Temple Institute announced that, quote, it is time to stop waiting and start doing, unquote. After decades of intensive and study and research, the Institute has partnered with an Israeli cattleman and using state-of-the-art techniques to, under strict rabbinical supervision, we are going to raise a head of red cows here in Israel. And that Institute's former director, Rabbi Chaim Richmond, quote, we are going to select proper candidates from this herd of the fulfillment of the biblical requirements and the commandments of the red heifer, unquote. He added, such a red heifer, or a para aduma, is a prerequisite for the restoration of ritual purity, the ultimate resumption of the divine service of the Holy Temple. In recent years, several red heifers have been born around the world, but each one has been disqualified for one reason or another. Building a holy temple and worshiping in it are not permitted by God without the restoration of ceremonial purity, which is only possible with the ashes of the red heifer mixed with the purification water necessary for restoring ritual purity or ceremonial cleanliness. So we see this in ceremonial magic all the time. This is nothing new. The red heifer bit is, I mean, there's easier ways to do it. But making this water, well, when I did it, I called it water of the art. And the ceremonial or the ritual cleansing is also a big deal. Like, you can't be taking a grubby body into this magic circle, son. It just doesn't work like that. The cleanliness, I don't know, it's ritual. So not only are you cleansing your body, but you're cleansing your soul, bro. Your soul. So you can't take that shit into the drift, man. If you're going to be dealing with some questionable, bullshit. Sorry, I don't know how I got off on a tangent. The God of Israel determined through his wisdom that the ashes of the red heifer is the secret to the restoration of purity in the world. Red Heifer expert and Temple Institute director Rabbi Chaim Richman told the Institute employee Yitzhak Reuven in an audio recording, there is a tradition that all throughout history there were 9 perfect red heifers. They were used for the cleaning and the purification, and that the appearance of the 10th red heifer is associated with the advent of the Messianic era and the rebuilding of the temple. Richmond said, we look forward to the fulfillment of the verse in Ezekiel 36:25 through 26. And that says, and I shall sprinkle pure waters upon you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanliness. And from all your idols I will cleanse you. I will also give you a new heart, and I will place within you a new spirit. This is, I grew up in Southern Baptist Church. So that's a little bit of an oversimplification. My old man was a non-practicing Catholic, and my mom was a Southern Baptist. So you can tell already I had an awful child. So like when I think of baptism from my origin story, it's literally like a bathtub. And you get in there with your clothes and your robe and all that, and then they dunk you, right? It's just like the way that the old John the Baptist did it. They call him John the Baptizer nowadays. They don't call him John the Baptist. But the way the good old John the Baptizer did it back in the day. This sprinkling business, that never really worked for me. Like the metaphor, bro. The metaphor is you go under the water. That's where the scary stuff happens. Like you can't see down there. It's the realm of psychology. And then you come out renewed. Like he said in Ezekiel, you got a new heart. And they placed within me a new spirit. And I am cleansed from my idols. And cleansed from my uncleanliness. But here in Ezekiel, he says, I shall sprinkle pure water on you. Not, I'm going to dunk your ass. Like you were at the Lyria West public swimming pool. Yeah. Yearning for the red heifer in the third temple. I got to ease off of this. I got to put this down. Building and worshiping in a holy temple is not permitted by God without permission or without restoration of the ceremonial purity. This can only be accomplished with the ashes of the red heifer, which are used to create the biblically required purification water. And without the temple, several end-time prophecies remain unfulfilled. Ezekiel 40:48, 2 theologians 2:3 and 4, 2:3 through 4, and Revelations 11:1 and 2. That may change very soon, except for the red heifer temple preparations are nearly complete. This station is fully operational. It's back when they were good, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink. The temple instruments and furnishings have been created. The building blueprints are being drafted. The Kohen, which are the priests, have been genetically identified and are being trained in the temple school. So this bit about these priests having been genetically identified, I guess that means because the tribe of Levi is the priestly tribe. So I wonder if there's some kind of genetic marker they're going back on and identifying the priests that can serve in the temple. I could be wrong about that. The high priest has been appointed by the nascent Sanhedrin Council in anticipation for Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and the one day of the year in which the high priest enters the Holy of Holies and the temple to make adornment of the nation of Israel. But there is no temple service. So why do we need the Kohen Gadol at this time? Rabbi Hiller Weiss, spokesman for the Sanhedrin, explains. The only obstacle preventing the temple service today is the political issue. And if that should suddenly change, as it very well could, we would be required to begin the temple service immediately and is therefore necessary. And we have a candidate prepared to fill in the role of the high priest, especially now. We have the Konami prepared to serve in the temple. This strikes me. I'm tickled by these first two sentences. The only obstacle preventing the temple service today is the political issue. If that should change suddenly, as it very well could, we could be required to begin the temple service immediately. I'm guessing, apparently, the Red Heifers, at least one of them that they have now, is going to be they're going to do the ritual on, I think, the Mount of Olives on Passover weekend. So that's coming up. That's next weekend, bros. Like, it's also my birthday weekend, by the way. Hold on, I got to check the dates. I don't know. I can't see it. Jesus, criminy. Yeah. Yep. Hey, next Sunday. Okay. So, yeah. So the ritual that I'm guessing that they're talking about doing with one of the 4 red heifers they currently have, that's, I don't know, is fed into this whole Al-Asqa flood situation, is going to be done on Passover weekend. So Passover, I don't know, I can't get into the whole, I'm not going to get it. You guys know what Passover is. You got to use the blood to paint the fucking door thing. This is why a lot of Southern Baptist churches, like Pastor Larry Solomon's church, I'm sure has a red door. Indeed, there is also a traditional connection between the back to it, I'm sorry, I'm babbling long enough, and the coming of the Prince of Peace. Even Israel's sages state that when the Messiah comes, he will stand on the roof of the temple and cry out, "Humble ones, the time of your redemption has arrived." That's if the Jewish Messiah was a professional wrestler. That's what he would sound like. Yo, brothers, humble ones, the time, of your redemption has arrived. I wasn't any professional wrestler. I was never a good Macho Man impersonator. Okay, purification of the red heifer reminds us that the man has the potential to rise above his transitory physical existence with all its false sense of hopelessness and misery. The impurity of death, states the Temple Institute. This is the role of the third temple for all mankind, and this is the messianic vision of the future. The call to live an eternal life liberated from the sham and the unhappiness, which is the sum total of the human condition for so many people. The call for the true joy of living life to the fullest with the knowledge of God. The Institute site continues to say the divine ordinance of the heifer beyond the grasp of man's frail intellect, with all the details and the preparations and the ceremonies, calls out to Israel and to all who seek to cling to the living word of God. Of Israel, purify yourself, shake off your despair. Death is an illusion, thus it is written. But all of you who cling to the Lord your God are all alive today. Deuteronomy 4:4, the deepest mysteries of the Torah. Therefore you shall do my statutes and keep my rules and perform them, and then you will dwell in the land securely. So before I continue with this, I just remembered something I was trying to recall earlier. There might have been a long lull where my gears were just grinding and I wasn't coming out with anything. But before whatever happened to me happened, before my hiatus, we were working through the book of Exodus, and more specifically, the Legend of the Jews by Ginsberg, the oral tradition of the Jews, working through the book of Exodus and the life of Moses. And right about the time when I went dark, we were talking specifically about how to set up the tabernacle and how to do like the breastplates and all this other kind of stuff. So if you're interested in the Solomon's temple bit, where they said like the blueprints have been drawn and all this stuff, I don't know if specifically the Temple of Solomon matches the tabernacle, the moving tabernacle from the Jews in the wilderness, but it might be something fun for you to look at, I guess, or whatever. And I have a plan to get back to those Exodus episodes where, like, I want to say 75% of the way done. It's a gigantic fucking process. So I am working on getting back to them. So back to this fucking thing anyways. Now back to this thing. Judaism considers the red heifer to be the deepest mystery of the Torah. The commandment for it, which is found in Numbers 19, as we know, belong to a category of biblical ordinances called the chok, or the chukim. The chukim are statutes that transcend human reasoning and include the chok, not to wear a mixture of wool and linen. This is all the stuff from Leviticus, right? You can't mix them. You can't match them. It also includes kosher dietary rules and prohibitions such as the chok not to eat pork. You know, suet might taste like pumpkin pie, but I'll never know because I won't eat the dirty motherfuckers. Chokum differs from the mistfatim, which are laws forbidding theft, murder, taking bribes, that kind of stuff. While mishfatim ordinances seem self-evident, the true meaning of the chukim are thought to be beyond our intellectual grasp. The ashes of the red heifer cleanse a person from the most serious form of contamination, death, and therefore also sin, which is the spiritual contamination that causes physical death. Paradoxically, oh no. Technical issue. Hold on for 1 second. Okay. Back to it. Paradoxically, all of the ritually pure who are involved with the preparation of the ashes of the cow become ritually impure when they come into contact with the very same ashes. I didn't even think about that shit. That's crazy. I want to write that down. in commission of creating this purification water, you taint yourself. I guess what the best part is when you're done, you can just wash your hands, right? You can just rinse off and you'll be okay. I mean, your hands are already in the shit. Anyhow, the process of purification. Then I shall sprinkle pure waters upon you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanliness and from your idols. I will cleanse you. I will also give you a new heart, and I will place within you a new spirit. Ezekiel 36:25-26, we were talking about that. Numbers 19 also describes the slaughtering and preparation process for the red heifer purification offering given by God as a lasting ordinance both for the Israelite and the foreigners residing amongst them. Numbers 19:10. God told Moses that the sacrificial altar of the red heifer was to be built outside camp, 2,000 cubits, which is 2,916 feet from the east end of the tabernacle. You can go back to those episodes. We probably talk about that. They're so gigantic, I can't remember what the shit I was talking about. In Yeshua's day, the altar was atop where? The Mount of Olives, which is where this thing's going to happen on Passover weekend. Although no ruins of the altar that existed then remain today. The Red Heifer Bridge leads from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Olives, where the priest would have direct view over the East Gate and the Inner East Gate, looking for the signal as to when to begin the sacrifice. According to the Bible, the altar was to be made of unhewn natural stone from the immediate area. It was also to have 4 walls and to be filled with layers of stone. It had a flat surface on top, with a ramp, not steps, leading to it. We're all Americans with Disabilities Act all through this whole thing. A temple priest would oversee the cow being slaughtered outside the camp, and then, taking some of its own blood in his fingers, would sprinkle the blood 7 times towards the temple. That's where the confusion is. They take this, just a sprinkle of blood in the general direction of the temple. You don't have to be inside the temple. You don't have to be underneath it. You don't have to be over top of it. You just flick it at where the general direction is. The priest would then watch as the cow's hide, flesh, blood, and intestines were burned into ashes, throwing onto the offering some cedar wood, hyssop. Whenever we talk about ceremonial or ritual, like water of the art, there's always hyssop. Always. The priest and the one conducting the heifer's burning would have become impure through these tasks, which would each have to wash his clothes and bathe in water before re-entering the camp, remain unclean until evening the new day. The ceremony of Arbitel, you get clean, and you get new clothes every day. Same thing here. Finally, a third who was clean until touching the ashes would gather up the ashes of the heifer and put them in a ceremonially clean place outside the camp, and they are to be kept by the Israelite community for the use of water of cleansing. It is a purification from sin. Just as the bodies of the sin offerings were burnt outside the camp, the ashes remain in a clean place also outside camp until they're required by members of the community. For this reason, still today, archaeologists and other determined people are searching for the ashes of that last red heifer, thought to be still hidden in a cave since about AD 15, somewhere in the vicinity of Jerusalem or the Temple Mount. Leviticus 17 examines the need to perform the sacrifice to God with the spilling of innocent blood, while outlining a careful method of slaughtering animals that ensures no guilt for the bloodshed. God required that even animals that are hunted for food must not be eaten with their blood. They should be drained and the blood covered the earth. An act some Jewish thinkers could illustrate disgust for the shame of spilling blood. Even today, properly removing the blood is required to earn kosher status. In fact, 3 men conducting the Red Heifer purification offering became unclean from their contact with death and had to cleanse themselves before returning to camp. For those who failed to purify themselves after touching a dead person or grave would defile the Lord's tabernacle, but they must be cut off from Israel because the water of cleansing has not been sprinkled on them. They are unclean. Cleanse me, and I will be cleansed. The priest to take some cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet wool and throw them into the burning heifer. During the sacrifice at the Para Aduma, cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet wool are thrown onto the burning sacrifice. Each of these items still remain necessary ingredients for purification from death for Jews who are awaiting the Messianic era. We see the same ingredients mentioned in Leviticus 14, the passage that we paired with the blood of a clean bird and the purification of a person once leper and taken into the house once moldy. Psalm 104:16, the psalmist cites the aromatic cedars of Lebanon as the trees of the Lord, and he planted when the hyssop carries both the symbolic and the actual characteristics of cleansing. Hyssop was also used in Egypt to help save firstborns from death. That's interesting, because before we were doing, the Exodus episodes, we definitely talked about that 10th plague. I need a goddamn refill. To take a bunch of hyssop and dip it into the blood at the basin and put some of the blood on the top and both sides of the door frame. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. Exodus 12:22. The use of hyssop in the Passover, the sacrifices, and the ceremonial cleansing rituals painted a detailed picture of the washing, cleansing, saving, purification, and the salvation from death itself that come only from the eternal God. The author of Hebrews also acknowledges hyssop's role with God, forming a covenant with his people in the sanctifying act thereof. When Moses had proclaimed every command of the law to all of the people, and he took the blood of calves together with the water, scarlet wool, and branches of hyssop, and sprinkled the scroll and all the people. This is the blood of the covenant which God has commanded you to keep. Hebrews 19:18 through 20. Thus we see David in Psalms 51 requesting that the Lord wash him and make him pure with hyssop, acknowledging that God is the one who cleanses. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Whiter than snow. The signs of the Messiah. Through the Tanka, the old covenant being purified from sin is synonymous with the color white, and the purification rituals required by God to point to the final cleansing of sin by the Messiah. Leviticus 16 describes Aaron confessing the sins of Israel onto the head of a scapegoat. We've done episodes about the scapegoat too. If you go back, these ones surely are in the Red Archive. I mean, surely this is back when we were talking about Masons riding goats and all this stuff. My boy Harpocrates. According to the Talmud, scarlet wool would be tied to the head of the scapegoat on the Day of Atonement, and when it supernaturally turned white, it would be served as a divine sign to the Jewish people that their sins were forbidden. That changed the whole It would serve as a divine sign to the Jewish people that their sins were forgiven. This happened consistently until around 30 AD, the time of Jesus' death on the Roman execution stake. The rabbis taught that for 40 years prior to the destruction of the temple, the lot did not come up in the high priest's right hand, nor did the tongue of the scarlet wool become white. Writes the Talmud in Tractate Yoma 39b. Come now and let us settle the matter, saith the Lord. Through your sins are like scarlet, and they shall be as white as snow. Although they are red as crimson, they shall be like wool. Another color change happened naturally when the red heifer's body was completely burnt. Its ashes turned white and was mixed with pure water called living water. Only then was it sprinkled onto people to purify them from the contamination and the contact with death and sin and that kind of stuff. When we accept the cleansing of our sins through the blood of Jesus, who is the source of the pure living water, we too become white. I didn't write all this, folks. We're teetering off into some pretty dodgy area. These are the ones who died in the Great Tribulation, and they have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and made them white. And just as the red heifer was sacrificed outside camp, so was Jesus. The high priest carries the blood of animals to the most holy place as a sin offering, but the bodies are burned outside camp so that Jesus also suffers outside the city to make people holy through his own blood. Hebrew 13:11 and 12. Leviticus 17:11 confirms it is the blood that makes the atonement for one's life. While Jesus' sacrifice brought us purification for our sins, biblical prophecies about the last days ensure that the temple sacrifices will resume before the Messiah's return. The prophet Ezekiel describes his visions of the temple to which the glory of God would come with his voice like the roar of rushing waters, and the land radiant with his glory. Upon the restoration of the temple and the great altar described in Ezekiel in minute detail, the Lord gives specific regulations for sacrificing burnt offerings and splashing blood against the altar when it is built. You will give a young bull as a sin offering to the Levitical priests of the family of Zadok, who come near to minister me, and declares the sovereign Lord, you are to take some of its blood and put it on the four horns of the altar and the four corners and the upper ledge and all around the rim, and to purify the altar and to make atonement for it. You are to take the bull from the sin offering and burn it in the designated part of the temple area outside sanctuary. Ezekiel 43:18 through 20. The purification offering of the red heifer will follow a similar course. The offering will be reinstituted according to biblical pattern, and its blood will be used to purify the place and the tools of worship, and it will be burned outside God's holy sanctuary in the pattern of ancient times. Many continue to wait the expectation of the red heifer that will prompt the rebuilding of God's holy temple, be used to set the stage for future worship in God's house. That day is not far off. And, that's been the Abracast. I'm John Towers, and we're running late and stoned. Have a good one.
interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com and visit the storefront for tarot cards, merch, and books. Support the show. Get access to the show archive at subscribestar.com. Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.